Welcome to Value Investing University. My name is Mariusz Konieczny, and in this video I will be walking you through the SEC site Edgar. In this video you will learn what Edgar is, what it stands for, when it was created, why it was created, and how to navigate the site to learn about various different companies and much more. So let's go ahead and get started. Edgar stands for Electronic Data Gathering, Analysis, and Retrieval System. What it is a big database of various documents that publicly traded companies are required to file with the United States Securities and Exchange Commission. Examples of such documents are the 10K, 10Q, and Forms 3 and 4. In addition to companies filing various forms on Edgar, third parties may also be required to file documents pertaining to companies that they do not manage. For example, Schedules 13D and 13G are filed by outside investors who have accumulated a significant ownership stake in the company. Edgar was created by the SEC as a pilot program in 1984. By 1995, the majority of publicly traded companies were filing documents with Edgar. To appreciate the usefulness of Edgar, it is helpful to talk about what it was like before Edgar was formed. You see, the Securities and Exchange Commission was formed to protect investors in the American stock market. And to accomplish this task, the SEC started requiring publicly traded companies to file various documents with the SEC for the benefit of all investors. However, at that time, SEC filings were submitted on paper and were only available by photocopying. As you can imagine, getting access to these documents was inconvenient and expensive. Consequently, this created a lot of inequality among investors, because those investors, such as large investment firms that had the resources to obtain this information, were able to get an edge over retail investors who did not have such resources. With the creation of Edgar, this inequality was eliminated, and anyone with an internet connection was able to obtain this information on various different companies for free. So now let's head over to Edgar and let's take a look at what it looks like. You can access Edgar's website through either the Securities and Exchange Commission at www.sec.gov, or you can just simply search it in Google. Type in Edgar, and let's go ahead and pick the first option. So this is the main website for Edgar, and as you can see, you have some options on the left, middle, bottom, and top right corner. For our purposes, let's focus on the choices in the middle. I'm going to briefly discuss each option, but the one that you will be accessing the most is the search for company filings. Let's start at the top. By clicking on the first option, a quick Edgar tutorial, you will be taken to a page where you can learn how to use Edgar. Probably the best thing you can do is to read Researching Public Companies Through Edgar, a Guide for Investors. Let's go ahead and click on it. As you can see, it is a pretty long and comprehensive document that teaches you in details how to use Edgar. A lot of the information in these documents are very similar to what I'm covering in this video. So let's go back to the main page. For now, I'm going to skip over the search for company filings
because as I mentioned before, we will be spending most of our time there. And before we go there, I would like to show you other things that you can access here. The third option, description of SEC forms. When you click on it, it will take you to a 80-page something PDF document that describes all the forms that can be filed with SEC. Let's take a look. If you scroll down, you can see various forms that can be filed with SEC, and most of them are forms that you probably never heard of. But if we go low enough, you can find a form that is familiar to us, which is 10K. It's an annual report. Here we have 10Q, which is a quarterly report, and you can keep scrolling and you will see various different forms. You get the idea. For right now, let's go back to our main page. The fourth option that we have available is SEC Forms List. And this is different from the previous link that we accessed, which was descriptions of SEC forms. When you click on this link, you will be taken to a page where you can access all the forms in a PDF format. So let's go ahead and scroll down to a form that you might be familiar with, Form 4. This form is used by insiders to report their buy or sell transactions in a particular company. And as you can see, this form is blank, which means it does not include any names of the insiders or the amount of stock that they purchased. Let's go back and take a look at another form, 10K. Again, this is a blank form which does not include the name of the company. However, unlike Form 4 that we previously looked, this document includes instructions on how to complete 10K. And while this information is most beneficial to the filers, it can also benefit you and I, because when you know the structure of a particular report such as 10K, it is much easier to read and understand it. Let's go back. Moving on to the next option, About Edgar. When you click on it, you will be taken to a page where you can learn about Edgar. You can find out when it was started, why it was started, and what it stands for. Since we already covered this information at the beginning of this video, let's go back to the main page. The next two options I'm going to skip because I never really find them useful. However, if you would like to contact the SEC with a complaint about a public company, you can do so through the Requesting Public Documents option. The next two options I'm going to bundle together. Through Edgar Public Dissemination Services and FTP users, you can obtain the raw data that Edgar itself receives. For example, if you were a computer programmer and wanted to create software or a website kind of like Edgar, but maybe you have better ideas on how to present or sort this information, this is where you would go to get it. There is this company called Edgar Online, and one of their products that they offer is Edgar Pro, which is a research tool that allows investors and analysts to access detailed information about all kinds of companies that file with SEC. Through computer programming, they allow investors to customize this data, which you can't really do with Edgar. And to provide this service, they obtain data through the Public Dissemination Services section. But for our purposes, unless you are interested in building a website or software using Edgar's raw data, you don't really have to worry about these options. The option that I skipped is Filers Preview Interactive Data Submissions. And you're not really going to use this option. It is mainly used by filers to preview whatever it is that they're filing to see what it will look like on Edgar's website. So unless you are filing something, this link is not really beneficial to you. Let's move on to the next option, which is SIC codes. Through the SIC codes option, you can access the SIC codes for particular industries. SIC stands for Standard Industrial Classification. So let's go ahead and access it. As you can see, you are taken to a page where you get a list of industries and SIC codes assigned to them. The first industry on the list is agricultural production crops, and this industry has a 100 SIC code assigned to it. The way I use SIC codes is to locate competitors of the particular company that I'm researching. But to do that, you first need to know the SIC code of the industry that your company operates in. And this is what I'm going to show you later on in the video. Let's go back to the main page. The final tab that I will be discussing before going to the main tab, which is Search for Companies Filings, is the information for Edgar filers. And as the name suggests, this is really for people who need to file something with the SEC and want instructions on how to do so. So let's go ahead and click on this and click on Edgar Filer Manual and click Download. This is a PDF document, which is a filer manual, only volume 1, and it's a pretty long document, 134 pages long, but it provides filers very detailed information on what to do and how to file various documents with the SEC. Because we're investors, we're not going to spend much time here, and on your own you can definitely read the manual, but for the purposes of this video, let's go back to the main page. Okay, let's move on to the main tab, which is Search for Company Filings. And as I mentioned before, this is the option that you will be using the most. So let's go ahead and click on it. Once you arrive at this page, you will have the ability to search for SEC documents in many different ways. But I'm only going to talk about the first 3. And the first one is really the one that you will be using the most. So let me talk about the other 2 first. When you click on Most Recent Filings, you will be taken to a page where you get access to the most recently filed SEC forms. On the top of the list, you can see is a Form 4, and on the right, you can see that it was filed on August 17th, 2012 at 11:58 p.m., which is about 20 minutes ago. Also, when you scroll down through this list, you can see that most of these forms are Form 4, which are used to record buy and sell transactions by insiders. So if we want to see other forms, we can exclude these forms by checking this box and retrieve filings. And now you can see that we can see all kinds of forms. We can see a 10Q, 144, S1, which is a registration statement. So with that being said, this is a nice page where you can find the most recent forms, but I don't really use it that much because there's just too many companies out there, and I want to be able to narrow down my search. So let's go back. Another way that you can search for the SEC documents is through the full text search. So let's go ahead and click on it. This feature allows you to enter a keyword or phrase, and Edgar searches all the SEC filings from the last 4 years and generate matching results. So you can think of it as a Google search for Edgar documents. So let's give it a try. Let's type in American Express and click search. As you can see, the search generates all kinds of documents that possibly include American Express in them, and we have S1. If we scroll down, we have another S1, S3. So theoretically, this is a nice feature, but unfortunately, After I used it a few times, I got really disappointed. At first, I was really excited about it, but I learned that it's just not very good. I literally typed in phrases from a particular 10K that I was looking at, and I was hoping that the search would generate the document that I was taking these phrases from, and I got all kinds of results, but the one that I was looking for. So I don't really use this feature. Maybe one day, if SEC makes this search better, I will revisit it, but for now, I'm just not interested in using it. So let's go back. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about the main option that you will be using the most, which is the first one. So let's go ahead and click on it. And you are taken to a page where you have various different ways to search for a company. If you already have the company's ticker symbol, which is usually the case, you can just enter it here. And let's go ahead and enter AXP for American Express and click OK. We are taken to a page with various SEC documents. But the first thing you want to do when you arrive at a page like this is to make sure you are at the right place. And in this example, on the top left, you can see the name American Express. So we are at the right place. But let's go ahead, let's go back again. And let's say we don't know the ticker symbol of a company. And let's try to search for American Express by typing in American Express and click OK. Now we are taken to a completely different page, and it is because American Express phrase is used by a lot of different companies, and Edgar generates a list of them that use American Express in their names. So to be taken to the same page, we have to locate the company that we're looking for, and I am pretty sure, going down the list, that this is the company that we're thinking of. So let's go ahead and try it. Yes, this is exactly the same page that we were on before. But let's go back again. I want to show you something else. Let's use a different company. Let's use a ticker symbol NROM, which is a ticker symbol for Noble Romans Pizza, and click OK. Oops, we get a result, no matching ticker symbol. But I know for sure that this is the right ticker symbol. So let's go ahead, and instead of using ticker symbol, let's type in the company's name, Noble Romans. And now we are taking to a page exactly where we want to be. And in this case, when I typed in the name Noble Romans, I was taken directly to this page because obviously there are not a lot of companies out there that are using the same name. But the takeaway from this is, if you are using a ticker symbol and it doesn't work, and usually it happens with smaller companies, don't panic. Try to type in the name of the company, and I'm sure you will be taken to the correct page, assuming the company is required to file with SEC. Another way that you can search for the company's filings is through the file number. And I don't really use this feature much because why would I know the file number? I usually don't have that. Another way you can search is by state, and let's go ahead and give it a try. I'm from Illinois, so let's pull up some companies. This is a list that Edgar generated of companies in Illinois that are required to file various documents with the SEC. I don't really use that feature at all. Let's go down the list. You can also search by country, and if you click on it, you have a list of various different countries that you can choose from. Similarly to a state search, I don't really use it at all. Going down the list, we have SIC codes that you can search by. Remember when we were talking about SIC codes, each industry is assigned a particular SIC code. So if you know it, you would enter it here. So let's go ahead and try 1000 and click search. 1000 is assigned to metal mining. So this is a list of companies that operate in this industry. Let's go back. The way I use SIC codes is, as I said before, I already know the SIC code for a particular company that I'm researching, and I want to find a list of competitors. So this is how I would use SIC codes, but I wouldn't really use them through this search, because how would you know the SIC code of your company? You would first have to locate it. So let's say we want to find all the competitors of American Express. Instead of using SIC search, I would just type in AXP for American Express and be taken back to the page that we were before. But right underneath the name of American Express, we can find SIC code. It is 6199. And instead of taking 6199 to the previous page, I can just click on it, and it displays me all the competitors, all the companies that operate within that industry. And if I want to study them one by one and see how they compare to the subject company, then I could do that. So that's how you really want to use SIC codes. Let's go back. Now, one thing that I want you to notice is that on the bottom here, it says and ownership forms 3, 4, and 5. And as a default, it is excluded. So when we clicked on American Express, we did not see any forms 3, 4, and 5 because they were excluded. And if we go back and if we include them and go back, then all of a sudden we can see that there are these forms appear on the list of SEC documents. Once we're on this page, we can also control this inclusion or exclusion through the ownership right here. And again, if we exclude them and search, then they will be excluded. And if we want to include them again and we search, then they will show up again. Now that we went through various different ways to search for a company, let's take a look at some of the forms that are filed with the SEC. But instead of using American Express, let's use a different company with a ticker symbol FLOW, which represents Flow International Corporation. What they do is they manufacture machines that use water technology to cut materials such as metal, plastic, and other materials. And water cutters are used in many different industries such as aerospace and automotive manufacturing. So let's go ahead. After checking whether this is the right company, let's pay attention to a few of the things below. As we already covered, SIC codes are shown right below the name of the company. We can also learn that Flow International Corporation is located in the state of Washington. This is all self-explanatory, but one thing that I want you to pay attention to is the fiscal year end. And in this case, it is 0430, which means that this company chose to end its fiscal year on April 30th. And usually you have companies using December 31st as their fiscal year. And if we go back for a second to American Express again, we can see that this is exactly what American Express used as its fiscal year end. So let's go back to Flow again. On the right, you have the company's business address and the mailing address, and below you have various different forms that the company filed with the SEC. You have the 10K, which is the annual report as it says in the description. You have the 8K, which is called the current report. Then down below we have 10Q, which is the quarterly report, and many other forms. All the forms are sorted by date with the most recent filing on top. And in this example, the most recent form that was filed was DF 14A. Anytime you see A behind a form, it means amended. Now, all these forms that are listed here, as a default, there are 40 forms listed per page, and we can obviously change this to 100. And if we wanted, let's press search to refresh. If we wanted to go back to the first form that was filed by this company with the SEC, let's continue clicking next, 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 and scroll down. We can see that the first form that was filed with the SEC was 10Q in 1995, and more specifically March 8 of 1995. One thing that I want you to notice is that you will find this on many different companies. You don't see any registration reports such as S1. And the reason for this is Flow International Corporation was incorporated way before SEC was requiring companies to file with Edgar, and that's why we don't see any registration statements. But if we go back to the search, and instead of using Flow, let's use Facebook with a ticker symbol of AFB, and now we go down. Notice one thing, how we are seeing so many forms for. So let's exclude them. And now when we go down, we can definitely see a registration statement S1 for Facebook, which is pretty reasonable because they just recently went public. Let's go back to Flow. The feature that I like to use a lot is filing type, and you can have various different forms displayed here. So let's say if I just wanted to see a 10Ks, so I type in 10K and search, and this is all I get is various 10Ks. And as I mentioned before, an A behind 10K means that the form was amended. But I like this feature a lot because when I study a company, I usually read the past 10 years of the company's 10Ks, and by typing in 10K into the filing type, this is all I get, and I can just go one by one and read it. Versus if I removed it and clicked on search, I would have to read this 10K, then go down through many different documents, and then click another 10K, and it would just take forever to go one by one. But by typing 10K into the filing type, I can just narrow down my search only to 10K documents. And you can do the same thing with typing in 8K, and boom, and you get a list of 8Ks. You definitely never really use 8Ks, but you can definitely go at 10Qs, and all you get is a list of quarterly reports that the company filed with the SEC. So let me clear this. Now, the next feature that you could use is prior to, and I don't really use it that much, but if you wanted to come up with all the SEC documents that were filed prior to, let's say, January 2001, you could type in 2001-0101 and click search, and Edgar would generate companies' various documents that were filed prior to the date that you chose. So the most recent document that was filed was December 13th, 2000. So like I said, I don't really use this feature a lot at all. Actually, I don't use it at all, because if I want to find the forms filed prior to a certain date, I just use next, next, next until I get to where I want to be. One other thing that you might find useful is, remember how we can include or exclude forms 3, 4, and 5, which are used by insiders to report their buy and sell transactions. So as I said before, if we want to include it, we can include it, and these forms will appear here. If we exclude them, we just exclude it and search. But if we have them included, and let's say we access this form, and we click the first option, this form was filed by Craig Sunada. And now let's go back and access the one below this. This form was filed by John Lennes. Now one neat thing that you can do is, instead of looking at these forms through this feature, you can also access insider transactions right here. And if we click on this, we are taken to a page where we can access the same information, but let's say we wanted to click on John Lennes and click on his filings. Now we are taken to these same forms, but all of these forms are by the same person. So if we wanted to find out the CEO, how often he buys, it would be much better to go through this link than it is to go one by one and try to find out, how many shares the CEO bought, and in the process we also find out how many shares the CFO bought and other insiders. So this is just a little neat thing that you can find beneficial, and you can also find out other people that are part of the company, whether they are a director or they are a president or CEO or CFO or any other title. So that's just something that I thought is beneficial for you to know. While there are different forms filed by companies with the SEC, let me talk about the most important ones. So let's start out with a 10K, which is, as I said before, an annual report that is filed by companies, and it is an absolute must read. So let's go ahead, click on this. When you arrive at this page, you might get a little frightened because there's all kinds of links here. And really the thing that you want to access is usually the first link, form 10K .htm. But below you have various data files, and I will talk about them later in the video, but for now let's access the first link. As you can see, we are taken to 10K as it is indicated on the form. This 10K is for Flow International Corporation, and it is, as I mentioned before, a very important document. And if we scroll down through the document, we can see a table of contents, and it is interactive, so you can click on financial data and you will be taken to this section. Let's go back again. So let's slowly scroll down through 10K, and I will just briefly describe what is included in it. The first item, the companies describe the company's business, what the company does, whether it manufactures something or whether it provides services. In this example, Flow International Corporation is a global technology-based company providing customer-driven water jet cutting and surface preparation solutions. And we can go on and read exactly what they do. Then usually the company provides its history, its business strategy. For example, how is it planning on growing? Is it going to grow through acquisitions, or are they planning on growing internally? This is where you will learn that. Moving on, products and services. What is it that they manufacture? What kind of services do they offer to their customers? Going down, marketing and customers. How do they market their products? Do they sell them through retail stores? Do they have salespeople, making calls? This is the section where the company will describe how they sell and market its products and services. Then competition. Is the company in a fragmented industry, or is the industry highly competitive? In this example, it says our major markets, both domestic and foreign, are highly competitive with our products competing against other water jet competitors, as well as technologies such as lasers, source, plasma, etc. So this is where you learn how the environment that the company operates in. Moving on, a business segment. Does the company operate through one business segment, or does it have various business segments? A lot of times you have companies that acquired other companies, and these other companies serve as separate business segments. So this is the area that you learn about it. Let's skip a little bit. Employees. How many employees does the company have, and how many of them are in the United States? How many of them are abroad? Do they have all full-time employees, or are some of them part-time? This is the area that you learn about it. Another very important area is risk factors. This is where the company describes various risks associated with its business. For example, if the company's revenues, let's say 40% of the revenues come from one customer, that's a risk factor. This is where a company would describe it. In our example, let's take a look at some of the risks. Rising commodity and fuel prices may affect our results and operations and financial conditions. This is what you want to know. Now, every company will have certain risks. It's important for you to be aware of them, but don't panic. You will never find a company that is without any risks, but you obviously have to read them. Moving down. In this example, because Flow International is a relatively small company, the stock price is volatile. You want to know that. Moving down. Here, properties. You will learn whether the company owns their own properties or whether they lease them. Another important thing for you to read about is legal proceedings. Is the company involved in any lawsuits? And if it is, how much is it going to cost the company? Sometimes this information is unknown. Other times you will find the management estimating what they think it will cost to resolve a particular lawsuit. This is something you want to know about. Then another very important section is item 7, management's discussions and analysis of financial conditions and results of operations. This is where the company compares one year to another or one quarter to another, and they go through revenues. Why did revenues increase? Was it because it was internal growth, or was it because they acquired a company? A very, very important section to read. Usually the company talks about cost of sales. Why did the cost of sales increase or decrease? What were the gross profit margins? Why did sales and marketing increase from one year to another? Why did they decrease? Very, very, very important section for you to read. As you can see here, they discuss selling general and administrative expenses, and they compare 2012, 2001, and 2010 to one another, and discuss them in more details. Why did they go up or down, and how did they compare to previous years? Liquidity and capital resources, very, very important section. This is where you learn how much cash does the company have, and how it generates the cash. Does it finance its operations through internally generated funds, or does it finance them by raising capital, whether it's by raising debt or selling shares? Again, a very important section to read and be aware of. And finally, we arrive at the company's financial statements, starting with the balance sheet. Then the company's income statement, and the company's cash flow statement. One thing that I would like you to notice is that the balance sheet usually contains information about 2 years. In this example, we have the balance sheet from 2011 and 2012. But income statement has information on 3 years, 2010, 2011, and 2012. The same is true for the cash flow statement that includes information on 3 years. Moving on, usually there is a fourth statement included, which is a statement of shareholders' equity. Right after the financial statements, you have a section that has footnotes. As you can see, note number 1. Usually at the beginning of the footnotes, the company describes its business again, and a lot of the information included in this section is very similar to what you already read at the beginning of 10K, but this information might be much more detailed than you previously saw at the beginning of the report. For example, they might discuss the health benefits that they offer to their employees that they didn't necessarily discuss it before. Also, they might have a section on acquisitions, and they might talk about how much they paid for an acquisition, how they allocated the money, whether part of the money went for inventory or property and plant and equipment, and how much was allocated to goodwill. These are some of the things that you would not see at the beginning, and you definitely want to read footnotes. Moving on. As you can see, property and equipment, we talked about properties before, and it wasn't as detailed. Here we have a section of property and equipment, but we have them broken down into buildings and leasehold improvements, land, furniture. Again, this information at the back end of the 10K are much more detailed than at the beginning. A lot of times you might have a section that talks about separate segments of the business. This is how you can find out whether there's any value. For example, you might have 4 different segments, but 2 of them are losing money and the other 2 are profitable. And but overall the company is losing money because the 2 segments that are losing money, they lose more money than the profitable segments. And you might find out that there's value, because if the company is planning on a closing or selling the unprofitable divisions, it can create shareholder value. And this is the section that you would usually learn about how much each individual segment, how much money it makes. And in this case, we have a standard segment, an advanced segment, and they break it down, how much money it makes and what the gross margins are for each segment. So this is in no way a very detailed video on how to read 10K, but this should give you a good idea of what 10K looks like and what it includes. The next SEC filing that you definitely want to read and I would like to discuss here is 10Q. So let's go ahead and click on it. And again, same thing that we did with 10K. You want to click on the first link and it takes you to 10Q, as you can see here, by Flow International Corporation. The difference between 10K and 10Q is that 10Q is a quarterly report, and it is not as detailed as 10K. So as you can see here, when we scroll through 10Q, it usually, obviously it starts off with the table of contents, but after that it goes straight into the financials, and we start off with the balance sheet, the income statement, and because it is for a quarter, it will show the 3 months that it covers. But if it's a third or second quarter, then it will have 9 or 6 months as it is indicated on the right. Then you have a cash flow statement. And remember when we were looking through 10K at the beginning of the report, the company was describing its business. Here in 10Q, there was no description of the company. So if you want to find out what the company does, starting with 10Q is probably not the best place to start. But you should definitely read. You don't necessarily have to read all the 10Qs, but the most recent 10Qs you should definitely read. So let's just go through really quick through this report. Right after the financials, we have footnotes. And right after the footnotes, you have the most important section of this document, management's discussion and analysis of financial condition and results of operation. Again, this is the same as 10K, but instead of talking about various years, in here the management talks about how one quarter compares to the previous quarter and the quarter exactly 1 year ago. So again, we have some information about segments. You get the idea. So let's go back. Another SEC filings that you want to be familiar with is 8K. And the 8K is called a current report. Every time something major happens with a company, such as an acquisition, the company files an 8K to communicate this information to its shareholders. The same information will be included in the next 10Q or 10K, but because these documents are filed quarterly or at the end of the year, they are not filed every time something happens. For this purpose, the 8K is used. So let's take a look at it. This is a little not as confusing. We can just click the first one, and as you can see, this is Form 8K, Flow International Corporation, and it's a very brief report. And all we have here, Flow International issued a press release dated June 27th reporting results for the company's fiscal 2012 fourth quarter and year ended April 30th, 2012. And that's all there is to it. The next form that I want to discuss is DEF 14, which is known as the Definitive Proxy Statement. This form needs to be filed when the company is soliciting shareholder votes. So let's go ahead and click on it. It is a form that you definitely want to read for any company that you are considering investing in. So as you can see, we are taken to Schedule 14A for Flow International Corporation. So let's scroll down. As always, you see the table of contents. And in this form, usually what it is, it starts off with information about what it is that the company wants the shareholders to vote on. In this case, they are trying to elect 3 directors to hold offices for 3 years, terms ending at the 2005 meeting of shareholders and until their respective successors are elected and qualified. So they provide instructions on how to vote, and also they provide recommendations from the management on what the management thinks shareholders should vote. Now that's voting instructions. Then this form also talks about various directors and who they are, what their background is, how much experience do they have in a particular industry, do they serve on other boards. Again, this is information that you want to read. You want to know if these directors are independent, how many other boards do they serve on, because if you have a director that serves on 50 different boards, well, how much time is he really going to spend serving you as a shareholder? The board of directors is supposed to represent you. So you want to know who it is that is representing you, and how many different boards of other companies do they serve on. Moving on through the form, usually in this form you will find various different committees, the compensation committee, audit committee, what it does, who is part of the committee, nominating and governance committee, again, who is on it, how our directors chose to be part of it. Very important things that you want to know about. Moving on through the form. Here you have a section on how these directors are compensated. Do they get paid with cash? Do they get awarded stock? And what is the total compensation? Then you get to a section that you learn about the management, who they are, what's their age, what's their title, and then a brief description of who they are, similarly to when they were describing directors. How many years of experience does a particular executive have? What university they graduated from? What title do they have? When did they join the company? What other companies did they work for before they joined the company? Are they a founder of the company or not? Very important things you want to know about. Then you have a table of stock ownership of management and principal shareholders. This is the section that you learn about how many shares does the CEO own? Does he own any? As a group, all officers and directors, what's the percentage of the company that they own? Again, you want to know this. Do they have any skin in the game? If they don't, then why do you think they care about you as a shareholder? But if they own a lot of stock, the likelihood of them being on the same page with you is much higher than if they didn't own any stock. Moving down. Then you have a section of major shareholders. In this case, Freshford Capital Management owns a 9.21% of Flow International. What I like to know is when I'm interested in investing in the company, who are these guys? Because I'm a value investor and look for underpriced securities, are these guys also value investors? So you take the name, you Google them, you find out who they are. Maybe you can also find out what other companies they invest in. Again, very important section. Here we get to a summary compensation table. This is where you find out how much your management is making. What is their salary? How much stock were they awarded? Do they have any options? And then at the end, you want to find out what is their total compensation and how does it compare to previous years. How much does the CFO make? Now, you can make these comparisons, and what I like to find out is if the stock did not perform very well over the last 3 years, did the management pay themselves more, or was the compensation tied to the performance of the company's stock or the performance of the company's business? This is the form that tells you all of this. Okay, let's go back and take a look at another form. Forms 3 and 4 are filed with the SEC by insiders to show their buy and sell transactions. Form 3 is a little different than Form 4 because Form 3 is the initial insider filing, and the following transactions are reported on Form 4. So to take a look at some of these forms, we have to again include them here and do a search. And as you can see, we have several Forms 4, but we don't have any Forms 3. Oh, here it is. So let's take a look at it. So this is how Form 3 looks like, and in here we have the name of the person filing, the date of the filing, which in this case is August 2nd, 2011, the company involved, and who the insider is in relation to the company. In this case, this person is a director, and right here it shows the amount of securities owned. So in this case it's 4,000 shares, and D stands for direct. So let's go back and take a look at Form 4. Let's choose this one. So Form 4, it's a little bit more detailed, and as I mentioned before, Form 3 was the initial filing, and Form 4 is the following transactions. So in this case, the person filing is Craig Sunada. So because he's filing Form 4, we know that he previously filed Form 3. And here we have the issuer, which is Flow International Corporation, and this is the date that the transaction took place. In this case, the person filing is an officer, not a director like we previously saw. And as mentioned, the transaction took place on July 19th, 2012 for 27,880 shares. And it was an acquisition. That's what A stands for. If it was D, it would be for disposition. The price that the person paid is $284. And after this transaction, this person owns a total of 98,371 shares. The final set of SEC forms that I would like to discuss are Schedule 13D, 13G, and 13F, which are filed by investors. Schedule 13D is a form that must be filed with the SEC under Rule 13D. Once a person or a group of investors acquires more than 5% of the company's shares, they are required to file 13D, which is a public document that can be viewed by anybody. This form has to be filed within 10 days of achieving a 5% ownership stake. So let's take a look at one of the 13Ds. So you can see this is Schedule 13D. Flow International Corporation. The investor is Otter Creek Partners. And you can scroll through the form. And this is what it looks like. Now, one way what I like to do is, when I look through a company that I'm interested in, I look through the list to see if there are any Schedule 13Ds filed, because it tells me if there's other investors that are possibly seeing what I'm seeing. And let's say when I click on this, I don't have to go inside the document to see who the investor is. I can see it right here, who the investor is. And a lot of times I want to find out who they are and what their investing philosophy is. Because if I'm a value investor and I'm looking at this company and they are also value investors, then they might also be seeing what I'm seeing. But also a very useful little trick that I use to find other investment opportunities. So let's say I know for a fact that they are value investors. Let's say I want to know, okay, so they like this company. What else do they own? So you see this link here? I can click on this and it takes me to outside from where I was. It takes me to Otter Creek Partners, and it tells me all the filings that they have done with the SEC of other companies. So here we have 13D. Let's click. This is a filing that involves Flow International, but let me see some other ones that they filed. This is a completely different company, and if they're value investors and they're buying this, maybe I want to look at this company and see if I also am interested. So that's just a little trick that I use to find other investment opportunities. So that's 13D. 13G, as you can see right here, is a little different. It's a similar form to Schedule 13D in that it also reports an entity's ownership interest when it is more than 5% of a particular company. What makes them different is that Schedule 13D is a shorter version than Schedule 13D, and the entity filing does not intend to gain control of the company. In other words, the entity filing Schedule 13G is planning to only be a passive investor. So let's take a look at it. Again, I can also see what company is filing it here even before accessing the form itself. So this is what the form looks like. It's much shorter than the previous form. Another form that I would like to discuss that I previously said I would talk about is Schedule 13F. Schedule 13F is also known as the Information Required of Institutional Investment Managers form. It is a form that has to be filed with the SEC by investment managers with more than $100 million of assets under management. The form must be filed within 45 days of the end of each quarter and must include a list of the investment manager's investment holdings. If we scroll down through a list of SEC filings of Flow International corporations, we will not find any 13Fs. And the reason for this is that 13Fs are filed by investment managers. So we have to go back to the beginning of our search, and instead of typing in a ticker symbol, we would have to type in the name of a hedge fund or a mutual fund. So let's go ahead and try Pabrai Investment Funds, run by Monish Pabrai. And we are presented with two options. Let's go ahead and click on the second one. And here you go. You have a list of various different forms that Monish Pabrai filed with the SEC, and most of them are either 13Gs or 13Ds. and also 13Fs. So let's go ahead and click on 13F and click on this again. And here we are. We are taken to a form 13F as indicated on the top. And again, we also probably want to check if we are at the right place. And here's his name. So we are at the right place. We can scroll down. And here we have a list of the investments that are included in his fund. Bank of America, Berkshire Hathaway, Brookfield Residential Properties, etc. Let's go back and try out someone else. Let's say you wanted to find out what Bruce Berkowitz of Fairholme has in his portfolio. So we will type in Fairholme. And second option, Fairholme Capital Management LLC. And here we are. Again, the same thing, various different forms. Most of them are either 13Fs or 13Ds or Gs. Let's choose the first one. And there you go. Form 13F. If we scroll down, we have a list of investments that are within his mutual fund. So again, we have AIG, Bank of America, Berkshire Hathaway. A lot of the investments that you find here, we previously saw Monish Pabrai holding. So this is what 13F form looks like, and it is one of the ways that you can search for investment ideas. If you have your favorite managers, whether it is Bruce Berkowitz or Monish Pabrai or whoever it is that you like, as long as your particular manager has more than $100 million of assets under management, he or she is required to file Form 13Fs, and you can log into Edgar's website and check out what they own. The final idea that I would like to talk about is something that I briefly mentioned, but I wanted to reserve it for the end of the video. And to talk about it, let's go back to Flow. Remember how previously we accessed the 10K and we just used the first link to get to the document, but below, right here, are what they call data files. And they are called XBRL files. And if we click on the first one, we are taken to a page where, you know, it's barely understandable. There's a bunch of tags. It looks like a different language, and it's because it is a different language. It is a computer language, kind of like an HTML. So it is not intended for you and I to read it. This is for computers to recognize it. And here's what I mean. If we go back to the 10K and we go through this report, because we understand the language that this report is written in, we can understand it. However, companies have a lot of freedom in how they want to word certain things. I mean, you can write about the company's description in 100 different ways, and you and I will understand it, but computers are not as smart as are. They have to have the information presented in a very systematic way for them to recognize exactly what it is that you're trying to communicate to them. If we go all the way down to the company's financial statements, for example, here we are at the balance sheet. When you and I read this, we can go ahead and read cash and cash equivalents for 2012 was 12.9 million. Now, this is pretty simple for you and I to read. The computer cannot read it like this. The computer has to be told exactly what it is that the computer is reading, the beginning of something and the end of something. If you ever took computer programming in school, you know exactly what I mean. but if you didn't, it might be a little harder to understand. But what XBRL is, it is pretty much telling the computer through various different tags when, for example, cash and cash investment starts, when it ends, and when does 12.9 million start and when it ends, and then go on to different different things on the balance sheet, such as inventories or property and equipment. And this is achieved through XBRL. But XBRL, like I said before, is used by computers. So if you're a computer programmer and you have to, you want to go through the entire 10K and let's say put it in Excel, you could do that by having XBRL data. And if you notice, if we go back to this page and type in 10K, and all we're going to get is a list of 10Ks for the last however many years. And notice these two blue links that says interactive data. The third, fourth, and on, they don't have this. And here's why. If we click on the third 10K, notice that we don't have data files. If we click on the second, we have data files. And it's because XBRL was introduced several years ago. And now it is required for companies to file their 10Ks and their 10Qs also using XBRL data. And even though you're not a computer programmer and this may be totally useless to you, actually it is very useful, because if we click on interactive data, what it does, it takes us to a page where we can view the 10K in a way that is broken down. So we can go to financial statements and we can choose balance sheet and just look at the balance sheet. Then we can go to other different statements, such as cash flow statements. While this is nice to look at, it's still not something that is very useful to you, because you can very easily get the same data just by going to the table of contents on the 10K that I previously described. But what is very, very neat, because of XBRL data, you can download the entire 10K in an Excel format. And here's where you can do that. View Excel document. So you click on it and you can download the entire report in an Excel. And what this is useful is if you're typing in the balance sheet or income statement into Excel, it saves you a lot of time. But this puts the entire document into the Excel. And what you want to do is you want to find the right tags. So let's say we want to go to this is an income statement, and as you can see, you already have everything written into a format that you can use to come up with all kinds of ratios, gross profit margins. You can calculate them yourself. And without the XBRL data, you have to type this information in by hand. So now the good thing is that with XBRL data, you can download it straight into Excel. That's the good thing. The bad thing is that XBRL data is only available for the last few years, which means that if you want to have access to 10K from 2006 or 2004, unfortunately there is no data files. And if you want to get the financial statements, then unfortunately you would have to type them in by hand. But going forward, everything is an XBRL format, and it just makes the life of you and other analysts much easier because you have this information at your fingertips.
In this video, we covered a lot of information. And the best way to get the most out of Edgar is to simply use it a lot and just play around with it to see what you can learn. So with that being said, thanks for watching, and I hope that this video was helpful to you.